And warmer for the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family podcast. We've got a great podcast for you. In this segment, we are going to recap what we all saw in the NCAA title game. We'll give you guys a few little tidbits as well. Some of the teams that were the best against the spread, some of the teams that were the worst against the spread this season as well. We won't spend too much time on it because, well, there's no money to be made anymore in the 2024-25 season, and hopefully this podcast was able to help you make a little bit, as we did get the title game winner. If you listen to the bracket preview show that I gave out, where I gave out my bracket, we had a perfect Final Four, perfect title game, and Florida gets the job done. We will recap that, and then we'll talk with our good friend Rob Donaldson in segment number 2. We're going to take a look back at this season, but we're going to start to turn it forward, because starting tomorrow, that's when I start to take a look at the transfer portal, look at all these coaching moves, try to decipher what we're going to be getting for the upcoming 2025-26 season. Do not think that just because the games for this season are over, that this podcast is over. For those of you guys who have listened, this goes all the way back to when this was known as the basketball overtime betting show. This became Hoopin' with Hoops and then Coast to Coast Hoops. This podcast has not missed a day in over 1,900 days, and that will not be ending. So this is going to be a podcast that will be with you guys all 365 days this year, regular season and off season, because with 364 Division I teams, there's a lot to parse through. I will be giving you guys conference previews for every single one of these conferences in the off season as well. So I'm going to be with you guys all throughout here, but we are going to bask a little bit tonight in the fact that Florida was able to get the job done. So we will do that as well, and then we'll talk with our good friend Rob in a few minutes. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you, for this podcast, you do have one or two ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GNet_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to on this podcast via that 5-star review. And the only Twitter/X questions I was getting was on the refereeing in the national title game, and everything today is brought to you by Edge Boost. Edge Boost is making sure that bettors can be able to access their funds 24/7, 365, because they do a tremendous job of making sure that you're always approved for all of your transactions, because it is a bank account. You're not utilizing credit or anything like that. You earn cashback rewards as you use Edge Boost, and when you go to edgeboost.bet, utilize the promo code of Greg, Greg, you get a dollar for dollar match on your first $25 deposit. And before we recap everything that happened in the title game, do want to just take a minute here. I know that I very much keep this strictly to betting and everything like that, but I do want to take a minute here to thank all of you guys that have listened throughout the entirety of the season. I know that some of you will be with me during the off season. I really appreciate that. For those of you guys that will be probably taking a little bit of a pause until the games return in November, I appreciate every one of you guys. This podcast will always be here for you, and trust me, the support that you guys show me, it is very, very much appreciated. I know that you guys have been with me for a very long time. Hopefully I was able to reward you with some sort of winners. Hopefully I was able to, if you didn't even necessarily take the bets, because I always recommend never blind tailing anyone, hopefully I was able to lend some good insights, give you guys some good nuggets, and at the very least feel a little bit more confidence about the bets that you did place, whether that be tailing myself, whether that be fading myself, because I mean, if you found some success in maybe a weak point of myself, that's a very good thing as well, because all of us get some stuff wrong. Trust me, I've gotten plenty wrong. Look no further than the first round of the NCAA tournament this year, but you know what? I appreciate all of you guys that do tune in, and your listenership is why I'm able to keep everything 100% free with regards to all my daily handicaps in terms of baseball, college basketball. Like, if you think that just clicking on this podcast doesn't do a lot, I mean, it's a reason why I'm able to operate the way that I do. So a big thank you to every single one of you for all the clicks that you guys give me in the offseason as well. That also does a lot of good for myself as well. I will just throw that out there. So if you ever have a few free minutes and you want to decide, hey, what's happening in college basketball right now, I'll be with you guys. And I just appreciate that out of all the support that you guys have given me. Had the opportunity this March to be able to do some writing over at ESPN as well. So I mean, without you guys, none of it would be possible. So a big thank you, and hopefully you guys have Florida on your bracket. Let's take a look back at everything that we did see in the title game, and you know what? We'll take a look at some season-long trends as well.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
65-63. Florida gets the job done. They led for 1 minute and 3 seconds in this game. They were down all night long until the very end. For Florida, Walter Clayton goes just 1 of 7 from 3-point range, does throw in their 7 assists, and for Florida, Florida. They lost the turnover battle in that first half by a count of 9-2. Did a much better job in the second half. In the second half, they won the turnover battle, if math serves me correct, by a count of 7-3. For Houston, they go just 6 of 25 from 3. LJ Cryer goes 4 of 11 from the outside, and you do the math, everyone else, they went a whopping 2 of 14 from three-point range. Cryer had 19 points. Nobody else for Houston goes into double figures. And for Florida, the savior in this game, in my opinion, was Will Richard. 18 points, goes 4 of 7 from three-point range. Houston, they lose the rebound battle 40-39, but they had more offensive rebounds in this game. For Florida, they go 17 of 21 at the free throw line. Houston went 9 of 14 at the free throw line. That loomed very, very large in this game. Houston takes 16 more field goal attempts than Florida, but Florida does indeed find a way to be able to get the job done. So the last game of the season, it does go under the total and goes the way of the favorite, as in most places Florida was laying a point, maybe a late a point and a half. You still were able to get there. That half a point very nearly came up big, but that said, in terms of what we all saw this season in college basketball, the underdogs did cover 50.7% of the time. 2,968, 2,792, and 98 against the spread. And the overs had at a clip of 50.6%, 2,875 overs, 2,804 unders, and I believe that we had something like 90 or so pushes along the way. They don't list the pushes on the website that you take a look at. And if you're looking at best teams in terms of against the spread record in all of college basketball, Florida was actually right there, and we've seen that over the last few years. UConn was always the dominant team against the spread. For Florida, 29-11 against the spread this season. Only 3 teams had a better against the spread record. Florida A&M at 23-7. Shout out to the Rattlers. They actually had your best against the spread record this season in terms of cover percentage. Robert Morris won 26-8 against the spread. UC San Diego 25-8 against the spread as well. And then if you're looking at major power teams, the only other team that really cracked the top 10 from a power conference, Michigan State at 24-12-1 against the spread this season. If you're looking at the worst team in all of college basketball, Eastern Washington, it was a gift that kept on giving. 7-22-1 against the spread. Cal State Fullerton, you know that this podcast was fading the heck out of Cal State Fullerton all season long. 8-21-1 against the spread. And in terms of overs and unders, Florida was a very interesting team in that they were a little bit of a chameleon. You needed them to play fast, they would play fast. You needed them to play slow, they would play slow. And overall for the season, Florida 21 overs to 19 unders, so some pretty rock solid balance out there. If you're looking at the Houston perspective of things, they were able to do a nice job of being able to slow down games, but they had some rock solid offense of their own. For Houston, 15 overs, 23 unders, and 2 pushes. And if you're wondering who the top over team in all of college basketball was this year, that would actually be Lemoyne. 24 overs and 7 unders. So shout out to Lemoyne for being able to do that. And your top under team was the UMKC Kangaroos with 21 unders to 8 overs. So that's what we saw in college basketball trend-wise this season, and that's what we all got for the 2024-25 campaign. We're going to chat next with our good friend Rob Donaldson. Does such great work over at youtube.com/Rob Donaldson. We're going to talk about what we saw this season. Is the top heaviness that we saw a little bit of a sign of things to come, and what should we be gauging here in the offseason? That's up next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast. Back here, lovely Las Vegas, for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beast and Family Podcast. We are doing this just after the Nets are cut down, and there's no better person to end the final regular season podcast of the show than with this man, because he joined me all throughout the offseason. He joined me all throughout the season. He's one of the best out there. I know that he, along with myself, were talking about the team that just cut down the Nets Monday night out there in San Antonio. We've got Rob Donaldson aboard. He does a great job with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets, over on youtube.com/Rob Donaldson. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at RobDFB altogether. And Rob, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Greg. It's been a fantastic season. It was a fantastic season, and even though the NCAA tournament maybe didn't have, the Cinderella drama of years past, the chalkiness of aligning the Final Four with the 1 seeds proved to just deliver 3 amazing games for the final 3 games of the college basketball season, and that felt like a just reward for a great sport and just a great season overall.
Oh, absolutely. And how much do you think that the team that was able to cut down the nets in San Antonio and Florida was just hiding in plain sight for a long time? Because I mentioned it many times on the show. We had the exact discussion. We were both thinking, why are we sleeping on Florida so much? And lo and behold, they are able to catch fire at the end of the season. And I think that it is so big that even though a team might be getting off to a blistering start to the season, it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. I felt like Florida was the best team from like mid-February on.
Yeah, and to your point, everybody's enamored with those early kind of big games that we get between, Auburn and Duke playing each other, or Duke and Kansas. And it feels like, the juggernauts are battling early on in the season. Every UConn matchup in the kind of the early stages felt like it was aligning for this is going to be the Elite Eight matchup or the Final Four, or at least that's how it's billed. But the reality is we don't really know about these teams until they hit conference tournament action, or not even conference tournament action, but just conference action in general. And I do feel like when we were watching Florida, they didn't have any bad losses the entire season. They were handling teams they were supposed to handle. They were playing up to teams that they, surprisingly, nobody was kind of writing them in to win. And time again, whether it was deficits they were coming back from or just outright shocks, I think about them going to the jungle and winning that game handily without Will Richard. There's a number of things you can point to that were just clear indicators that Florida was going to be a team that was going to last all the way until the championship game.
Oh, I'm right there with you. And with this Florida team, it just felt like they were the most deep as well. Certainly a lot of attention was paid to Walter Clayton, but he really didn't have a good game in the title game. As a matter of fact, I would say that Walter Clayton was pretty bad from a scoring standpoint. You could throw in there the fact that he had 7 assists. That was very much a helper, but I think that that's so big that Florida was able to win this game with Walter Clayton going just 3 of 10 from the floor. I think that that does really speak to how Florida was able to get the job done just with a cohesive unit, because a one-star player can only take you so far in college basketball. I feel like this year was a great reminder of that.
100%, and especially when you're going up against a team like Houston that if they're kind of designed to take away your best player. And so it is the cumulative parts that you have, the complementary pieces that are going to be on the floor with that star that's being taken advantage of. That was the handicap going in when we were talking about it. Walter Clayton Jr., I did feel like he was going to get neutralized. And so I looked at the players around him and thought, well, Elijah Martin can score. We just saw that against Auburn. We saw it at FAU. We've seen it his entire career and the entire season. We look at Thomas Houck. He had a huge game against Texas Tech. Will Richard has stepped up at multiple points and was really the star of the show tonight. And when you have that kind of depth, and not just depth that's, okay, they're good complementary pieces, but guys who can actually take over a game and put up those numbers and get those lucky boards and steals in transition, Florida had all the pieces to mitigate, or kind of make up for the lack of a star power guard. And that absolutely showed in the second half.
Oh, it certainly did. And let's call it what it is. That was a title game between two of, in my opinion, top 3 teams in all of college basketball. I do think that start to finish, if you wanted to award a true rightful champion without having it be a one and done scenario, probably give it to Duke. But I don't think that there's any question about it. We got ourselves a tremendous title game. And how much do you take a look at this as perhaps a sign of things moving forward? Because a lot of people, you mentioned it at the top, would have liked to have seen a few more Cinderellas, what have you. And I always think that title games like this, where you do truly get 2 of the top 3 teams in the sport, that's all that you can ask for, whether that be Major League Baseball, whether that be NFL, whether that be college basketball. I thought that this was a good thing for college basketball, and though we might not see a whole bunch of 11 seeds making the Final Four once again, I do think that the parity will probably be returning a little bit next year. I thought that this was just a product of the season that we had in general.
It's going to be an interesting test case, because I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I don't fully agree with the idea that, parity will just be back in college basketball, because, when we saw a team like Florida and how they were built through the transfer portal, through some kind of continuity, and continuity in basketball now is a player playing at the same program that he did the previous season, because there's very few 4-year guys or 3-year guys or 5-year guys that have just stuck with a program. Heck, you look at Janai Broom, he's a sort of an Auburn guy, but he's a transfer from Morehead State who played there for 2 years. Chad Baker-Mazara, all these guys. You look at Florida with Chinyelu, Will Richard, Walter Clayton Jr., Elijah Martin, all transferred talented guys. And I do feel like that's the new wave in college basketball, where Is continuity nice? For sure, but you have to have guys in your lineup from the transfer portal to kind of show that you're accumulating the best possible talent. And if you don't have that element to your team, I do wonder about your kind of long-term prospects when it gets down to, the Elite Eight, Final Four, and championship game.
No question about it. As Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And I think that you explained exactly why this podcast will be continuing daily. Even though we are not going to be having games until November, I think that it is so important what we see in the offseason. Like, there are so many people, as we know, this is a sport that really starts up after the Super Bowl for many people. And just explain to the folks how important it is to be joining or to be looking at things in the offseason, to be keeping up with things, because you join me a lot in the offseason. I feel like we were better for all of our conversations, and I'm always a believer, whether this be in college basketball, the NFL, whether you take a look at baseball, what have you, that bets that are won during the season, they're won through great preparation, they're won through being able to keep up with things in the offseason. And I think that college basketball might now be the creme de la creme of all these sports with the transfer portal and everything that goes on.
Yeah, and especially when you kind of know these players that are entering the transfer portal, right? I mean, whether it's a successful team, we just saw Trey Holloman from Michigan State enter the transfer portal. I'm sure when you look at the Elite Eight, there's going to be significant roster turnover from the guys, the reserves on the bench, or even the starters who are graduating or maybe going somewhere else. There's going to be roster turnover across the board, and if you're behind the curve on that and you're trying to be capitalizing on, the early stages of college basketball season, or even all the way into the mid kind of season of college basketball, I can tell you definitively you are going to be behind the curve. So I was really appreciative, when you were inviting me on during the summer months to talk about these coaching changes, programs that I was excited about, players that I was excited about in the transfer portal, because there's hundreds, thousands of guys in this portal. And let me tell you, just because a guy is getting paid from the portal doesn't mean he's a good fit for a team, doesn't mean he's even a good player. Yeah, right. Grado Sabor. I mean, Omar Ballo. There's a number of different guys who went from the star to a dud. I think of even a Wesley Cardette going from Chicago State, being a star, to Providence, and everybody just kind of turning against him. Or a Jalen Blackman going from Stetson to Miami. There's duds all across the board. It pays to be on top of these players and to really know who to key in on.
And if you looked at the 247 Sports rankings 2 off seasons ago, because they rank all these transfers out, and personally, I don't utilize a lot of these transfer rankings, but I thought it was very interesting. Someone posted a photo. You know where Walter Clayton was ranked when he was transferring out of Iona to Florida?
No idea, but I'm guessing it wasn't top 20.
Nope, it was, I believe, 67th. It might have been 69th. It was either 67 or 69th, and I do think that there's truly good talent out there, and when it comes to evaluating college basketball, I don't know how you feel about things. It's a little bit harder towards the beginning part of the season, but I feel like with so many transfers, you know what you're getting a little bit more, because when it comes to gauging freshmen, that I think is the hardest thing in taking a look at college basketball. And even though going from insert your mid-major school here in the Big South to a power conference team, that's going to be a big giant jump. You at the very same time, at the very least, have college footage of these guys rather than trying to gauge these high schoolers that you've never seen before.
100%. And that's really been a turn over the last 3 or 4 years, because freshmen in college basketball now, with the current landscape of NIL and the transfer portal, freshmen are the X factor. They're the unaccounted for, kind of unknown element to a team. And sure, you're going to have guys like a Cooper Flagg who you just know are immediate stars of the show. But a lot of the freshmen, you don't know how they're going to work out. Heck, you look at Rutgers, that was a top 25 team entering the season. A lot of people thought that they were going to be a top 10 team at one point with Ace Bailey and Harper at guard, because those are NBA guys. But sometimes it just doesn't work out. Guys don't mesh well, or the inexperience becomes a big factor when you are playing a transfer portal heavy team like, say, a Florida or a Houston, where you have guys with 4 and 5 and 6 years of experience in this sport. That's a difference maker, and you got to be on top of that thing. And again, you kind of brought up the freshman standpoint, but that's where I feel like nowadays, those are the complementary pieces. Those are the potential X factors, but the portal is where the lifeblood of college basketball currently lies.
No doubt about it. And it's going to be so interesting to be able to gauge this offseason because as we are recording this podcast, we've got north of 1,900 guys in the transfer portal. Hundreds upon hundreds have already committed to schools. And just what do you make out of this cycle of things? Because we've got a lot of big name guys that are currently out there. We've got a lot of guys in general that are going to be switching schools. And I think that's going to be very interesting to gauge things, especially with the north of 50 coaching moves that are going to be happening when it's all said and done by the end of this offseason.
And I think you kind of nailed the last point of bringing up coaching moves, because I think that's truly where the best betting value year over year kind of lies. I mean, when you look at a guy like a Dennis Gates, when he took over Missouri, it was like a 13-win bump in year one. Will Wade goes to McNeese State. It's like a 20-win bump in year one. Pat Kelsey to Louisville. Brian Hodgson to Arkansas State turned that program around and is now heading to a program like a South Florida. There are so many guys who are in year 2, year 3, or starting year 1 at a new program that I feel like that's where the betting value should be, or that's where we should lock our lines on, because that's where I feel like the year over year difference truly kind of comes to the forefront.
Totally agree with you. And now it is that time of this podcast where I ask, Rob, what is your top 25 and your final four for the 2020? No, I'm kidding, of course, because I think that we both know trying to be able to gauge things right now, trying to dive in on futures, I feel like would be a defeatist effort. And we are always going to get all these websites that are going to be like, oh, way too early, top 25 and everything like that. But just how do you take a look at the offseason? Because I've been calling it this on the podcast the last few years. This is a time of year where you want to be sort of hunting and gathering, trying to be able to find your bearings. Sure, you know that someone that has like a top recruiting class, like BYU, is going to be bringing in some very, very good studs. It's not like they're going to be missing the NCAA tournament or anything like that, but I think that it is so important that if anyone's looking to lock up their money for 12 months, that they really do their research and they take a look at so many different aspects of things in terms of college basketball, because I think that betting futures is harder and harder, just in college sports in general, lump in their college football as well.
100%. And I feel like if you're wanting to dive into the futures market, you should be waiting until September, October, when these rosters are finalized, coaching staffs are finalized, and we're starting to get a little bit more info and a little bit more of a handle on what each conference looks like and what each program looks like. Right now, it's almost like you're guessing if you're taking a stab at the futures market, because there are going to be more players probably entering this portal or even maybe decommitting from their current commitment of their school. And heck, you look at, an RJ Lewis that's still out there uncommitted, Jaden Quintance, just kind of going down the major kind of top end players. Where are they going to go, and how does that affect, the current the roster that they're going to be sort of filtering into? Because what we know is you can't just throw a Hunter Dickinson or a Grado Sabor, an Omar Ballo, or a Coleman Hawkins at a lineup and just make it pop. There's a chemistry aspect that's so important, and a lot of the time when you are the guy and you transfer to another program where you have to kind of assimilate, it just doesn't always work out.
Right there with you. And Rob, what are some of the aspects that you're going to be taking a look at this offseason? Because I think that'd be way too early to be looking at specific teams, specific players, and anything like that. We've got 6 months to be able to do so. So there's going to be plenty of podcasts. I'm sure that we're going to be having a lot of chats here in the offseason, because you always have the invitation to come back on this podcast, Rob, just like last offseason and the offseason before. But just what are some of the things in general that you're going to be looking at the next few months, and some of the things that you're going to try to flesh through to be able to put yourself in a good position for next college basketball season?
Well, one of the things I really like when we are talking about the transfer portal are the down transfers. So we're talking about high majors going down to mid majors, or just mid-major, kind of upper mid-major programs kind of losing a player to a lower mid-major or a low major. I do feel like that's where a lot of the roster turnaround or the fluctuation in win totals sort of lies. So it's going to be interesting to kind of monitor it from that standpoint to see, who the down transfers are, because those are the guys who are getting 6 minutes at their current program, and then we'll be getting 30 or 28 minutes next year. And that's where I feel like the most excitement lies. That's where I feel like a lot of these programs and coaches kind of really stake their claim in this sport. And Yeah, that's my favorite part to monitor during the offseason, and also just kind of watching how these first-year head coaches at their new programs end up just kind of building a roster. Obviously, Ben McCollum has a jump start at Iowa, but there is a guy like a Brian Hodgson at South Florida and a number of other coaches that are making their, first kind of roster build at a new spot, and I'm excited to watch that. Heck, we've seen a number of different crazy turnarounds in 1 year, and Pat Kelsey at Louisville, I think, was the poster boy this past season.
No question about it. I do think that this is going to be such a fun offseason to look at. Many of the coaching hires have been made. We've got a few jobs out there to be parsing through. We've got a billion transfers that are going to be, going through the portal. Some might return to their school. Some are going to be going elsewhere. We've got a lot to dive in on, and I'm looking forward to an offseason of chatting with you, Rob. You do such amazing work. Let the good people at home know what's all on tap for you, and for those that are looking for bets as well, because Rob does a ton with regards to baseball, much like myself. Let the good people at home know where they're able to find that on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys want to follow my Major League Baseball bets as sort of the precursor to the college basketball season and college football season on the back end, make sure you do so on my Twitter account @RobDFB and also on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Rob Donaldson. And as always, Greg, I appreciate having me on, and what a fantastic season, man.
It was a great year. Rob made it all the better. He is such an insightful mind. Every single time he joins me, lends incredible insight. So big thanks to Rob for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter /X timeline @Unit_1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So, per usual, please send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And as I mentioned, Rob is going to be joining me throughout the offseason. This is going to be a daily podcast, so there's going to be no days off. Starting tomorrow, we're parsing through the transfer portal, looking at these coaching hires, getting you set for the 2025-26 season. So thank you for all that followed along, and have no fear, I'll be back with you once again tomorrow.